Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
So much to talk about, you almost don't even know where to begin on a day like today. I spent yesterday, I had tickets to go see the Braves and the Mets, an important two games back-to-back, and it was wild. I was noticing that at the end of the game, both teams are celebrating. That had to be the first time ever that you had two teams heading to their locker rooms to do champagne celebrations and clinching playoff spots, but nonetheless, both teams are going, and I decided to go. In the bubble that was, it was almost like an information void, so to speak, and I don't know why I wasn't paying attention to headlines, but I wasn't really paying attention to headlines. I get a text message from friend of the show, returning champion, Melita Easters of the Georgia Windlass. Thank you for joining me this morning, by the way, about
Thank you.
About wanting to come on the show and talk about abortion. And I'm like, my first thought was, well, Melita is always welcome on this show. And abortion is a huge issue in the campaign cycle. But I'm so focused on the game, I'm like, I don't know what she's talking about. And so I was just like, yeah, you're always welcome on the show. And then I just kind of went back to watching the game. And then I get home and I see the news that Justice Robert McBurney has set aside Georgia's 6-week abortion ban. And that's when it hit me at like 10 o'clock last night. I'm like, oh, that's why she wants to come on the show. And I'm grateful that you reached out. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to join you always. And this is a big decision. I'm not sure how long the decision will remain in effect. Mm-hmm. So Judge McBurney, interestingly enough, he puts this order out mid-afternoon Monday. Mm-hmm. And this morning he will be in headlines again. He's having a bench trial having to do with some of the Fulton County Elections Board shenanigans.
Yeah.
But this order sets aside the 2019 law for the second time. The first time he set aside the law, it was based on a legal technicality called void ab initio, which meant that because the law was unconstitutional on its face, based on federal court rulings, it could not be upheld. It was unconstitutional on its face at the time it was passed. Mm-hmm. That part of his ruling was then appealed to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court overturned his ruling and sent the case back to him for a ruling on the constitutionality of the abortion ban. Mm. So it is the constitutionality of the abortion ban which he overturned in this instance. It was a 26-page decision basically saying the state cannot force a woman to carry a fetus that cannot live on its own. He said, quote, "Women are not some piece of collectively owned community property, the disposition of which is decided by majority vote. Forcing a woman to carry an unwanted, not yet viable fetus to term violates her constitutional rights to liberty and privacy," end quote. Now, next step, what will likely happen, and it must happen within 30 days, is the losing side in this ruling, that is the state, must file within 30 days a notice of appeal. So, if the state plans to appeal this case, and in all likelihood, because they appealed the earlier ruling, they will appeal this one. They must do so by filing that notice of appeal within 30 days. So by election day, we will know whether the state will be appealing this case, and we may very well know whether the state appeals this case with a motion for immediate reinstatement of the law while the case proceeds, which is what happened in the earlier portion of this case. After 8 days of the law not being in effect, the state Supreme Court ruled to allow the law to remain on the books while the appeal worked its way through the system. So this will be back in the courts. Now, some people speculated that it would go to the U.S. Supreme Court, but because the U.S. Supreme Court has sent this matter back to the states, whatever the Georgia Supreme Court rules will be the end of the road for the law. Now, this law, I think it's notable to make mention of. This law passed by in 2019 the slimmest possible margin, one vote. It was 92 to 78, only one more vote than required for a constitutional majority in the 180 member House. And the Georgia vote was the closest in any of the states which approved more restrictive abortion laws in that 2019 year. By contrast, like the 6-week ban in Kentucky passed by a margin of 71 to 19, and Louisiana's ban passed 73 to 29. And in Alabama, it was a 74 to 3 vote. Since 2019, Georgia Win List endorsed women candidates have flipped 3 seats in the legislature. And last year's 2022's freshman legislative class had more than 35 members. And so the makeup of the General Assembly has dramatically shifted since 2019. And so it's questionable as to whether this same law would pass. And you have not only that, but you have the reports that since this 2019 law has been in effect, you had 2 weeks ago ProPublica reporting that 2 Georgia women had died from abortion-related complications in the months after it took effect. And that reporting takes a while to come to light. And so we have no clue how many Georgia women have suffered dire consequences or even death as a result of this abortion ban.
I was struck by his majority mob rule sort of argument as well, Justice McBurney's decision yesterday, and it got me to thinking right away. It's hard to get a referendum on the ballot in this state, a statewide referendum, but I would actually think that if a statewide referendum were on the ballot in this state, that the majority of Georgia's voters, when you eliminate gerrymandering and voter suppression, that the majority of Georgia's voters actually would vote against this abortion ban. Wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. The polling shows somewhere between 65 and 70% of Georgia voters approve of a woman's right for medical autonomy and the idea that decisions about reproductive medical decisions should be made by the woman and her doctor.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's not, to me, that's inarguable. I was just struck by, to me, it was like, semantics. I would have said majority rule in a legislative chamber so disproportionately affected by gerrymandering, but I guess he didn't want to be too verbose in his 26-page decision. I just thought that was sort of an interesting, sidebar mentally anyway.
Well, it's very interesting that he hinges his decision upon liberty and privacy because in Georgia case law, we have a case going back to 1905, the Pavasich versus New England Life Insurance Company, that establishes some of the strongest privacy protections in the nation. That ruling from 1905 has subsequently been quoted in more than 200 cases nationwide and 4 Supreme Court cases. And so the privacy and personal liberty portions of his opinion will have to be carefully considered on appeal. He said, and I wanted to quote from the opinion again, that power is not unlimited. When a fetus growing inside a woman reaches viability, when society can assume care and responsibility for that separate life, then and only then may society intervene. So he's saying that while the state's interest in protecting unborn life is compelling, until that life can be sustained by the state and not, quote, solely by the woman compelled by the act to do the state's work, the balance of rights favors the woman, end quote.
So this is where I say, I remind our audience that, you're the executive director of the Georgia Win List. The Georgia Win List is an organization that champions women candidates who are pro-choice, and you have a full slate of candidates, some of them in swing districts in the state of Georgia, running for House seats, Senate seats as well. What sort of impact do you think this decision and putting the onus on Chris Carr, the Attorney General of the state of Georgia, what sort of impact do you think this has on the election? And, you've got campaign candidates out there door knocking with their volunteers talking about this issue. Does this put a little bit more wind in the sails?
Absolutely. So this year, we have a record-setting number of women, 77 women running for House or Senate seats across 81 of Georgia's 159 counties. And what this ruling does is it reminds everyone what is at stake in this election, because electing more pro-choice women, electing, flipping some seats from red to blue, gives those who favor a woman's medical autonomy, those who favor allowing women and their doctors to make the best possible choices for medical outcomes without having to call a hospital lawyer before a procedure that's medically necessary can be performed. Those issues, this decision reminds everybody of how important it is to have more women in the General Assembly, because some aspect of reproductive freedom will probably be back in front of the Georgia General Assembly in 2025, because the issues around in vitro fertilization are already being discussed as a possible legislative inquiry. And when anything within that section of the law is before the General Assembly, then the extreme wing of the Republican Party can start offering amendments and try to ban abortion and try to ban contraception and try to ban abortion medications, and any number of other extreme measures can get attached to any bill that falls within the scope of reproductive medical care.
Well, I guess we'll put a pin in that, wait and see over what happens over the course of the next 30 days. I don't think Chris Carr is actually going to wait all that long, but I guess we'll find out. We've got 30 days to do that. I'm going to take a quick break. We want to come back. It is Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. Celebrations abound, and Melita, of course, knows all about those, having been there the night that he won the election in Plains, Georgia, his hometown. We'll talk more about that when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn. You can follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms. That would be at Ron Show ATL, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads. I'll have the show notes from today's show at RonShowATL.com. Share those on Facebook all the time. Melita Easter is joining us from the Georgia Win List. It is Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. And what a way to celebrate. For $1, you can go to the Carter Presidential Library. I almost feel ashamed to say this. I have lived in Atlanta for 5 years now. I live 2 blocks from the library. And life gets so busy. You just don't have... I can't believe I have yet to I've gone through the gardens many times. I take many walks and strolls. I've yet to actually set foot in the library. And if I can get through my busy day today, maybe that's what I'll do this afternoon. And it's only $1. So,
well, it's fun to stroll through the library and see the various mementos of his most interesting career.
Yeah.
And the Lukovich cartoon from yesterday showed Jimmy Carter in a wheelchair crossing over the 100th birthday mark and headed towards a polling place, because he has famously told all the members of his family how much he is looking forward to voting for Kamala Harris as the first female president of the United States, which is appropriate because during his one term as president, he appointed more women and minorities to the federal judiciary than all of his 38 predecessors combined. And so how wonderful that he's putting his stubborn streak towards being able to vote for Kamala Harris.
Well, and only to be undone, to be outdone by the likes of Joseph Robinette Biden since then, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. That's something that Joe Biden can hang his hat on as well.
Yes.
So the 100th birthday, Jimmy Carter celebrating 100 years on this planet, and we are, just grateful that that he's hanging on, and again, just motivated to vote for Kamala Harris. Early voting, it's the 1st of October, so we're literally only days away from that even happening.
Early voting begins on October the 15th. Now, expatriates who live in foreign countries and military ballots have already been mailed, and those are beginning to be sent back in. But early voting in person begins on October the 15th.
Talk to me about Jimmy's legacy on his 100th birthday a little bit. I remember the time we had you on. You spoke of being in Plains, his hometown, the night he was elected, and just the impact that it had on that little community and that region of Georgia and the state of Georgia on the whole.
Well, he has had an amazing impact on Plains, and the tourism surrounding the admiration for him has been amazing. And he and Rosalind Carter chose their burial place to be in Plains on the family, what used to be called the fish camp. It's beautifully landscaped. They planned the landscaping many, many, many years ago. In fact, Plains had its annual peanut festival this past weekend. And I think that the impact of President Carter on that area is dramatic, but he has had such an amazing post-presidency with the work of the Carter Center in trying to eliminate guinea worm, for example, and other medical issues in underdeveloped countries. Certainly, we are embroiled in a very tenuous situation in the Middle East, but the violence we see in the daily headlines reminds us of how long the peace between Israel and Egypt lasted after he brokered the 1978 Camp David Accords.
That's true.
And, the other thing that's amazing during his presidency is the amount of federal land set aside, particularly in Alaska, but throughout the country. The environmental impact of Carter's presidency lasts to this day. And he truly was a steward of the earth during his presidency, and in the ways that he protected the environment. And of course, he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. And he was when he was honored, the chairman of the committee that awarded the prize to him talked about Carter's biblical goal for himself, that it was Ecclesiastes 11:4. The worst thing you can do is not to try. And the presenter of the Nobel Prize said that few people, if any, have tried harder.
Something else worth mentioning, while we still have tens of thousands of people who are without power here in the state of Georgia and many more in North Carolina and Tennessee, I thought that this tweet earlier today was worth pointing out. Bill McKibben tweeting that, a reminder, Jimmy Carter put solar panels on the White House roof in the 1970s, only to watch Ronald Reagan take them down. Jimmy Carter was a man ahead of his time on a lot of things. And can you just imagine? That's nearly 50 years ago. I know that because I was born in 74. Nearly 50 years ago, that solar panels were being embraced by the White House, by the occupant, the president of the United States and the White House. Where would we be today if we had channeled that energy, literally, into diversifying our energy grid? If every home that was affected, that didn't have power, that was habitable today in the wake of Helene, had solar power. Melita Easter's Executive Director, Georgia Windlass. Before I let you go, I can't not bring up the vice presidential debate tonight. What are you expecting to see?
I think J.D. Vance will be trying very hard to present an even-keeled demeanor, unlike his real demeanor. And I think Tim Walz will show us who he is. He has nothing to hide. J.D. Vance has plenty to hide.
And on that note, Rachel Maddow's segment yesterday, which I will dive into, I'm thinking on tomorrow's show, is worthy of reviewing. Scary stuff.
Absolutely.
You saw it too, I'm sure, right?
Yes, riveting.
Spine-tingling stuff. I don't know if it'll come up in the debate tonight, but it warrants being watched. I'll put that in the show notes as a tease today, and we'll go over it tomorrow here on The Ron Show. All right. Executive Director of the Georgia Windlass, Melita Easters, thank you so much for joining us on the commemoration of Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday and Robert McBurney's decision on the Georgia abortion ban. Thanks for the discussion, Day. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Broadcasting 5 days a week to make common sense common again. This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Can you just imagine, by the way, being someone from hurricane-ravaged South or East Central Georgia? You're desperate for somewhere to stay. You need gas. You need food. You need retail. And you say, let's just go to Atlanta. It's the largest city near, and we need to go there. And you're coming into town on I-20 westbound, and
tonight, a hazard in the air. Thick gray and orange smoke billows from a chemical facility in Conyers, Georgia, after a fire today forcing nearby residents to evacuate.
Please spread the word to stay away from this area at this point. The interstate, as you can see, is backed up.
Shelter in place. Keep your doors and windows closed. In the event the wind shift, this thing can change really quickly.
Officials say around 5 a.m. today, as employees were inside, a sprinkler malfunctioned, causing a chemical to start the blaze, which is now out and was contained to the roof.
By the way, this is from NBC News on Sunday night. Yep, that's right. The chlorine fire in Conyers has made national news, and there's a lot more to this story than just this fire. There is like a 7-year history, actually a longer history of this very plant and its long list of issues before. But again, just give yourself the perspective of being someone who's trying to get away from the devastation of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. You're in Augusta and you need to come to town to get some gas, or you're in Southwest Georgia and you don't have power and won't for days, and you just need to get away for a couple of days and let things settle. Or you're from Asheville, North Carolina, and you're coming to the nearest big city not affected, and you're driving into Atlanta and you see a chemical plume greeting you as you, do you just pause and go, do we really want to go there?
I do not know the specific type of chemical, but only that it is water reactive.
That is the voice of Marion McDaniel, the Rockdale County, Georgia fire chief. Water reactive, meaning the chemicals don't react well to water, meaning your standard water sprinkler going off on those chemicals is going to cause an adverse reaction as opposed to putting out a fire.
The company saying in a statement, our team is on the scene, working with first responders and local authorities to assess and contain the situation. No one was injured. The Environmental Protection Agency is now conducting air monitoring. Law enforcement pulling out respirators as a precaution. This isn't the first chemical scare at the BioLab facility that manufactures pool and spa products, according to the U.S. Chemical Safety Board. In 2020, a plume of hazardous chemicals was released.
Since I've been a part of Rockdale County for 7 years, this is probably the third incident of this magnitude.
No timetable yet on when the area will be safe. Dana Griffin, NBC News.
So Chief McDaniel literally said exactly what the folks at Environment Georgia, who released a statement, the state director, Jeanette Meyer, releasing a statement in the aftermath of this fire, reiterates. Yes, this is the facility's third fire in 7 years, highlighting what they say is the need for action from lawmakers and other agencies. Let me give you a taste of their release. The chemical plant run by Biolabs manufactures swimming pool chemicals and has caught fire twice before in the past 7 years. Rockdale County reported that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and Georgia's Environmental Protection Division, the EPD, have confirmed the presence of chlorine gas in the plume emitting from the site. By the way, I believe the evacuation order, the shelter in place, that's all been lifted. I'll go over that here in just a little bit. But more on the release from Environment Georgia. Chlorine gas can trigger a violent cough, nausea, vomiting, lightheadedness, headache, chest pain, abdominal discomfort, and corneal burns. Exposure to high concentrations can lead to respiratory distress and accumulation of fluid in the lungs. Earlier this year, the Bad Actor Bill was introduced by State Representative Rick Townsend in the Georgia General Assembly, but did not receive a hearing. The bill would block companies with a history of mistakes from receiving permits to operate in Georgia. That seems like common sense legislation. But in a pro-business state like Georgia, Environment Georgia State Director Jeanette Gray issued the following statement. I'm sheltering in my home today, along with many others in metro Atlanta, to avoid a toxic chlorine plume that appears to be connected to the massive chemical plant fire in Conyers this weekend. We already have enough to deal with following Hurricane Helene. The repeated fires at this facility raise important concerns that require action. First, the Georgia General Assembly should reintroduce, strengthen, and pass the bad actor legislation, she writes. In the next session, that would block companies with a dangerous track record from receiving permits to pollute in Georgia. Second, we need to make sure our state and federal environmental agencies have the resources they need to hold polluting companies to account. This kind of toxic exposure is not acceptable. As I say in cable television, but wait, there's more. Reporting from Kelly Yamanuchi and Dylan Jackson in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution outlines a long list of failures at this very plant. I want to say, here it is. In February of this year, Biolab received a notice of violation from the Georgia environmental regulators, the Georgia EPD, after inspectors uncovered several violations during an inspection the month prior. It's unclear if there's any connection to Sunday's fire. During the January inspection, the report said regulators found multiple improperly sealed and unlabeled hazardous waste containers on site. Used oil tanks and buckets were left uncovered, and inspectors noted that the company had not been performing its required weekly self-inspection. Multiple areas in the facility showed a neglect of facility maintenance to the point of creating potential safety hazards. It is advised that the facility take some actions to address the issue. That's what inspectors wrote in that report. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, according to this article, has also fined Biolabs tens of thousands of dollars for repeated safety violations stretching back to 2015, according to records. In 2019, for instance, the company was fined $6,000. Oh, $6,000. Well, that's a meaningful fine for a massive company like Biolabs. $6,000 fine for failing to provide, quote, effective information and training on hazardous chemicals, including chlorine. And look, this isn't just a Conyers, Georgia problem. Biolabs has issues at other plants as well. In the same article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they went over some issues. I thought this sounded familiar. In Westlake, Louisiana, a biolab facility there has also had numerous problems. After Hurricane Laura hit the area in August of 2020, a major fire at Biolab's Louisiana facility caused a release of chlorine gas and caused significant damage to the facility. The CSB said in a press release on its investigation of that 2020 incident in Louisiana that the facility manufactures pool and spa chemicals containing trichlorosuccinuric acid. Boy, I know I mangled that. Anyway, that acid, which when it, quote, comes into contact with small amounts of water and does not dissolve, it can undergo a chemical reaction that generates heat, causing the decomposition of TCCA, which produces toxic chlorine gas. The 2020 fire in Louisiana led to supply chain shortages affecting the pool and spa industry into 2021 and 2022, according to Pool Magazine. Biolab, according to this article, celebrated a grand reopening of its Lake Charles facility in Westlake, Louisiana in November of 2022. Biolab's then plant manager at the Westlake facility, Don Brunette, said in a statement on the 2022 reopening, "We're pleased to be welcoming our team back to our newly rebuilt facility, which is one of the most advanced trichlor production facilities in the world and even stronger and safer than before. In March 2023, a chlorine leak at the same Louisiana facility caused a cloud over the city of Westlake for hours, according to reports. And in July of this year, a fire at the Westlake facility caused the closure of a portion of I-10 and a shelter-in-place order, according to news reports. Sound familiar? Hold the phone. I just got word that Jeanette Gayer from Environment Georgia will be on to join the Ron Show in a matter of minutes. So I'm going to take a quick preemptive break and come back and have that discussion with Jeanette Gayer from Environment Georgia when the Ron Show returns on America One Radio and Progressive Voices via TuneIn. Thank you so much for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, Progressive Voices via TuneIn. We air 9 to 10 a.m. and 5 to 6 p.m. on America One, and then 7 to 8 p.m. on Progressive Voices before we podcast. As I mentioned before taking a quick breath of air right there, Jeanette Gayer joining us from Environment Georgia. Thank you so much for joining on the fly. I do appreciate that. I actually came across your mention in the article that the AJC published about the Conyers chemical fire, and I said to myself, oh my gosh, there's an organization that I can definitely reach out to when there are environmental questions impactful to residents in and around Metro Atlanta, where I'm based. And talk to me about this chemical fire, because not only is the facility full of history of issues, but this company in general, like they've had the plant issues in Louisiana. And my first thought was, I thought we were going to saltwater pools anyway. Thank you so much for joining us. You're actually directly impacted by this as well.
Yeah, I live on the east side of Atlanta and walked outside yesterday and said, why does it smell like a swimming pool?
Yeah.
And pretty much at exactly the same time got a notification on my phone that my son, who goes to elementary school in Atlanta, would not be allowed to go outside yesterday because of the chemicals that EPA, EPD were finding in Atlanta's airshed.
So in fact, I want you to, if you will, tell me about the bad actor bill that you guys were fully behind, because it's actually the first I'd even heard of it, and I follow politics from a pretty micro point of view, especially when the General Assembly's in session.
Yeah, well, the reason you probably didn't hear of it is the bill didn't move that much. So it was HB 1169. It was by Representative Townsend, and it was legislation that very simply said EPD should take into account the actions of a applicant for an air permit or a water permit in Georgia in other states. So if a company is breaking the law in other states, we should not be giving them permits to pollute in Georgia.
Right.
It seems really straightforward.
Common sense.
Unfortunately, is not actually incorporated into our permitting process right now. So that bill, again, was introduced, did not even get a hearing, but I think is a really great idea and could obviously be expanded to include a company's actions in state as well as out of state. So the biolabs example, this is a facility that has had now 3 fires in less than a decade. Clearly there's a problem there, and clearly they should not be given a permit to pollute in Georgia if they cannot maintain their facility responsibly.
Again, and this is not just a simple, it's this facility problem. It seems like it's a company problem, because they've been littering with issues in Lake Charles, Louisiana as well. After just reopening in 2022, they've had 2 more incidents since then that have been shelter in place, interstate closing type incidences. The bill we were talking about, I cite this example, like if Illinois chased a company off and said, listen, you guys we can't do this anymore. Like we should be doing in Georgia with biolabs. If a company were chased away from Illinois and came to Georgia's doorstep and said, hey, we want to relocate here, we're going to bring hundreds of jobs, blah, blah, blah. Knowing that sort of history comes with them from a state like Louisiana, we would have no legislation in place to stop them from doing that. That's kind of what this bill would aid state and local authorities with being able to say, no, we can't bring that here.
Yeah, right now, the Environmental Protection Division, we could also quibble about how they interpret the law, but the Environmental Protection Division reads the law and says that the law basically says they shall issue a permit. Once someone applies for the permit, they shall issue a permit. They can make that permit very strict. They can, really crack down on a couple different parts of the permit, but their hands are tied, again, they feel, when it comes to whether or not they have to issue a permit. And we just don't think that's right. If you're a company that has a really bad track record in state or out of state, you should not be able to get a permit to pollute in Georgia. End of story. This is, we're experiencing a similar problem on the Okefenokee right now. This is a company, Twin Pines LLC, that has caused all sorts of problems in state, out of state. And yet we're going to give them a permit to mine directly next door to a precious natural resource in Georgia. So I think there's a lot of examples where pretty clearly we should not be allowing companies free rein with our air and our water and our green spaces.
I'm actually already starting to hear murmurs of class action from residents. In fact, I work in real estate, so I have a client, a family client, that they're looking to sell their home somewhat soon, or sometime soon, and they're curious if it's going to impact their their return on their investment. I don't even know, I have no history of dealing with something like that to know if that'll actually have an impact on the resale of their home. I certainly hope not. And hopefully within a matter of days or so, this all sort of died down. But if that plant is still there and folks go, wait, isn't that the town that there was that huge chemical fire here like a month from now? I guess it could have some sort of impact on the resale of their home, And never mind the environmental impact. Obviously, we've heard horror stories about fish kills at prior fires and the way that they put them out. And obviously, there's going to be an expectation of some sort of environmental impact in and around that plant as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Jeanette Gayer, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this on the Ron Show. And we'll have to be in touch because I'd love to have you on again at some point in time.
That'd be great. Thanks, Ron.
Thank
Good
you so
to talk
much.
to you.
Same here.
Bye.
Mm-hmm. Finally, one last thought. I shared this meme on our Facebook page, Ron Show ATL, at Ron Show ATL on Facebook, or The Ron Show if you want to look for it. You can see the bag of my head on the logo. This meme, I don't know if you've seen it. It shows flood-ravaged area and, discombobulated homes and floodwaters high, and you see this small American flag floating in the water. It's I don't even know if this is AI generated. I do know, by the way, I had some friends sharing the Donald Trump AI-generated meme where he's wading in floodwaters with someone else. Listen, y'all, look at the hands. AI-generated photos always make screwed-up-looking hands. It's AI-generated. Donald Trump's not going to get in floodwaters and wade around in it with anyone, even for a photo. First of all, they're both wearing blue jeans. You don't do that in floodwaters. Anyway, the meme, and I see a lot of Trump voters sharing this. Not one more penny, better go to another country until our states look like this hurricane never happened. I said what I said. Give me a microphone. I'll say it again. Okay. Here's the problem I have with sharing that meme. It's making the rounds, and it warrants a little deconstruction. It's just another means to derail Ukrainian aid. By the way, does this include Israeli aid? I bet not, in the minds of a lot of the folks sharing this. But anyway, it's just another means in my mind to derail Ukraine aid. And it wouldn't surprise me a bit if this weren't the brainchild of like one of those Putin troll farms that, they use to gin up social media stuff. It wouldn't shock me a bit if that's where this originated. Which naturally means it's circulating amongst MAGA voters, the class of voters typically against big government spending on things like, flood abatement. Flood abatement projects, by the way, all in the infrastructure law that was passed just 2 years ago, by the way, which most Republican lawmakers voted against. And of course, the same MAGA voters that reject scientific consensus on climate change and the impact it's having on not just hurricanes like Helene, but global flooding ravaging the planet right now. In the empirical scope of once-in-a-century climate events our planet is experiencing just within the last decade. How many times have we heard the phrase 100-year flood? Well, we've heard it a lot in the last decade, and that's not 100 years. A decade is only 10. Anyway, the folks that are sharing this meme, they're the ones that go to rallies and cheer, drill, baby, drill, and mock the electric vehicle industry. Right now, as a matter of fact, I see a lot of, where are you going to go charge your EV with the power out across the region? Well, obviously that's going to be a problem, but you can't go get gas either because the gas pumps require electricity to get the gas to your car too, smart ass. Pardon me, I apologize. They bristle at the notion of having solar panels on one's homes, and wouldn't that be super helpful in areas without power right now, huh? And align with a man who says wild things about windmills and causing cancer, among other issues with windmills that he has. Definitely, we should spare no expense in putting our ravaged areas back to where they were before. And actually, we should enhance them, I believe. We should also invest in seeing to it that the likelihood they're hit like this again is diminished. We can do that. One party actually wants to. We're the United States of America, however. So this talk about foreign aid and yada, 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 we can walk and chew gum. For the life of me, I'll never understand how folks are incapable as adults, not dumb adults either. Like I've seen that meme from people that I went to high school with, and I know they're smart people, somewhat smart people, in maybe not, magna cum laude, Harvard, Ivy League, brilliant, but not dumb people who can discern for themselves. And it's just breathtaking when I see someone who I'm like, Alicia wasn't that dumb. She's a pretty smart girl. Maybe reserve judgment. I just reserve judgment. But I don't mind having the opportunity, when I see the opportunity, to say, this meme is kind of counterintuitive, and here's why. And that's exactly what I did. You can find it. You can share it if you like on your own social media apparatus. At Ron Show ATL. I do have it on Facebook. I have it on Instagram. I don't know if it went to Threads. If not, I'll get it to Threads as well so you can see it. And again, just reword what I said if you want to. I'm sure you probably have something more brilliant to say because I went to high school with people like Alicia who have not the sharpest crayon in the drawer either or in the box either. But I know what I know, and I know that I can discern a little bit of constructing the proper narrative versus not one more dime for foreign aid. That's such a and again, I want to know, does that include Israeli aid? Because that seems to be a pretty taboo third rail we don't touch right now. Anyway, tomorrow on the show, we will review the J.D. Vance, Tim Walz debate performance, popcorn watching event, I'm sure, tonight. Also going to dive into, I mentioned this before with Melita Easters from the Georgia Windlass, and thank you, Melita, for joining the show today. Thank you, Jeanette Gayer, for hitting us up at the last minute on the fly from Environment Georgia and discussing. I want to discuss it's about a 4-minute piece or so that aired last night. I'm sure it was longer than that. It was just a condensed on YouTube piece that aired on Rachel Maddow's show last night on MSNBC. And I'm not usually one that's going to tune into MSNBC 5 nights a week because I just don't believe in tuning in to get your daily diet of whatever your ideology is. I think that's dangerous. I say that all the time about Fox News. I'll say the same thing about MSNBC. If you just tune in to watch one side of the story, you're going to get just the one side of the story. Anyway, the piece that Rachel actually shared last night, however, is goosebump-inducing, spine-tingling, scary shit. And it's all about J.D. Vance's ideology, the ideology that he's sort of letting slip out at rallies and speeches from time to time, but we're actually getting in tiny clumps from old interviews that he's done and recent interviews too. Dude, keep quiet. You're letting your Project 2025 slip out. Anyway, it's pretty scary stuff. It involves basically just deconstructing the American government. And he's not shy about talking about it. And he's not shy about name-dropping people who are openly talking about it. I'm telling you, I wish I had a little bit more time today to dive into it because I'd certainly do that. But my gosh, we've got so much to deal with between the chemical stuff in Conyers and between the abortion reversal that hit with Robert McBurney's release yesterday and post-Helene. It's been a crazy week, and it continues to be a crazy election cycle. So thank you for strapping in and listening in and joining the Ron Show for another episode. I've got about 30 seconds left, so you hear me just drawing myself out, right? And I apologize for that. It's just been one of those crazy days and weeks. Anyway, you can listen to the show again if you only caught a little bit of it. We air 5 to 6 p.m. on the replay on the America One Radio app at AmericaOneRadio.com. Also 7 to 8 p.m. at Progressive Voices via TuneIn. And then I put it in podcasts on your podcast providers. Surely we're there, and show notes will be there for you as well at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. on America One Radio. Have a great day.